Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, our 36th podcast episode. I am so glad that you're taking time out of your life to join us for today's conversation, and this one is a very, very special one. Today you'll hear a conversation with the legendary Doc Severinsen, perhaps the most famous trumpet player of all times. He was with various NBC bands for 30 years and became the leader and frontman of Johnny Carson's Tonight Show band. But there is so much more to Doc than what we all saw on television. Doc's story is one that is the epitome of hard work and a total, continuous commitment to his craft. This is one I know you're going to enjoy, and we're going to get to it right after this message.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast.
So something that I've been giving a lot of thought to recently is how do you select the gear that you need to get your message out? Now, whether you're doing a podcast or you're teaching a remote class, the thought process behind all of this is exactly the same, because you have competition out there, whether it's other podcasts or YouTube videos or other teachers, things like that. And the problem that you're running into is that the equipment that you're using needs to enhance your message and not stand in the way of it. But it can be kind of confusing to figure out what do you need and how do you use it? Where do you start? So the way that I approach a problem like this is to start at the end. And in this case, the end is who is going to be consuming your content and how are they going to be consuming it? So for example, if you're teaching a remote class.
To hear the rest of this podcast, please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
Well, for this 67-year-old trumpet player, Christmas has come very, very early this year. If you were a kid and you like to play basketball, then I guess one of the real thrills in your life would be to get to sit down and have a conversation with Michael Jordan. And if you're a trumpet player, the biggest thrill you could ever have in your life is having the opportunity to sit down with the great legendary Doc Severinsen. And I'm having that opportunity right now. And Doc, I just don't know where to begin, but thank you so much for taking time to chat with me.
Start in the upper left-hand corner.
Well, before I do that, I have to tell you, my father was a candy wholesaler in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And when I was in 7th grade, he bought me a battery-operated record player, and I would be the stock boy in his warehouse, and I brought your record albums out there with me, and I played them while I was stocking shelves, and I've got them to my left here. I've got like 11 of your albums sitting to my left here, and they were so instrumental in me just developing as a musician and loving music and trying to develop a concept of sound, and I owe so much to you. So thank you very much.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear it.
So Doc, in preparing for our conversation today, I discovered that you grew up in a small town in Oregon and that your father was the town dentist.
That's right.
So how did you get the nickname Doc?
Well, This is a town of like, say, 600 people in the middle of nowhere, but right on the Columbia River. And my dad was a dentist, and then there was a doctor in town who also had the drugstore. And when I was born at home on the kitchen table at 6 a.m. And my dad assisted in the delivery, cleaned me up, wrapped me in a blankets, walking up and down Main Street with me. It was only one street, and that was Main Street. And the people in the town said, well, look here comes Big Doc and Little Doc. And it stuck from the day I was born. And my parents tried to get me to stop being called Doc. And I didn't understand that. I just said, no, that's my name,
That's wonderful. Well, your father wanted you to play the violin, and you wanted to play the trombone, but you said your arms weren't long enough, and your town music store only had a cornet. So how old were you at that time? And
there was no town music store. So my dad would get the violin out, and he had bought me a new, those little child's violins that are real violins with like 3/4 size. And he was so excited. Boy, here's this guy came over from Europe, and he was going to give me my violin lesson. And I was sitting there kind of, I'm guessing, not in a great mood. And I said, no, I don't want to play the violin. And he said, well, but you have to. He said, something you and I can do together. I don't play baseball or any of those things. And it'll be a chance for you and me to do something together. And I said, well, I'm not playing any violin. And he said, see that high chair over there, don't you? I said, yeah. He says, well, you can either practice the violin for an hour or get up in the high chair for an hour. Which is it going to be? I said, I'll take the high chair. So I got up there and sat down, and that went on for several days. And it finally began to dawn on him that I was not going to be playing a violin. So he said, all right, what do you want to play? And I'm thinking, why didn't he ask me that in the first place? And I said, well, I'd like to. We had a town band that played in front of a hotel downtown, 15 or 16 pieces, marches and waltzes and that. I said, I want to play a trombone like the one Wilbur Fletcher has. My dad played in that town band too, and he played clarinet there. And he said, well, you can't play trombone because your arms are too short. You can't reach the slide position. So he said, but you know what? I think old Herb Clark over at the Shell service station has a trumpet that he played in the Second World War, or the First World War it was. And he said, let's go ask him if you still got that. So we went down there. He said, yeah, I still got it. It's up in the attic. He said, my dad says, well, I'd like to have it for my son to try to play it. And he said, well, come by tomorrow and I'll have it all cleaned up and everything. And it was an old Busher No. 9 pea shooter, gold-plated, hand engraved, in a case that hadn't been opened in, oh God, decades. And when I got to the garage and they opened that thing up, and the smell of the trumpet having been in there all those years just knocked me out. I loved it. So my dad says, okay, Herb, we'll take it. How much though? He said $30. So my dad gave him $30, and I went home and he wrote out the scale on a paper sack and made the staffs with the fingering. Herb did to take with us. So I got right to it. I loved it because before that, I had some neighbors found an old Army bugle in their basement, and there's only one thing wrong, that it didn't have a mouthpiece in it. Well, I didn't know that, and I didn't care. I just stuck the lead pipe right up with my lip there, and within a few hours, I had people from all over town come and say, "For God's sake, make the kids stop playing that damn thing, will you, Doc? He's putting us out of business here." And so that's when we went down and got the trumpet from Herb Clark, and that's that.
Yeah, and so you started playing in the high school band at age 7. How old were you when you started playing in Herb's trumpet?
Well, 6 or 7. I think I was 7.
So,
but you have to understand that the town band was so bad, and the high school band, I mean, we were isolated in the middle of nowhere. And so you had to take things kind of the way they came. And, in those days, I'll say around 1932 or 3, along in there, you were lucky if you had a town band, which I thought we were. And they played marches and waltzes and a couple of overtures, and sometimes it was just horrible, and other times it sounded pretty good. And that was the first thing I heard, was the town band. And right then and there, that's what I wanted to do.
So when you picked up that horn for the first time and you started playing it, I mean, was it just like, voila, this glorious sound came out of the other end and you went like, whoa, this is fantastic?
I don't think so, no. But I will say this. It was loud. It was loud. And it was a small western town down in the canyon, typical. I mean, it looked like a movie set. And when I really cut loose on that trumpet or the bugle before that, you could hear it all over town. And the first day I had that bugle, the neighbors came down, Mr. and Mrs. Gray, and they said, "Our daughter, Ella, is not feeling well today, and your trumpet playing is not helping it at all." And I didn't bother to tell them, "Well, it's only a bugle." And so they said, "Would you please stop?" And I guess I did.
So how many hours a day were you playing?
Oh, there was no structure to it at all. My dad had it in mind when he wanted me to play the violin that I'd have a 1-hour lesson every once in a while. And my dad was a good violin player too. And I just was having no part of it. And so when I first started out, I remember right after that, I guess I got to playing a little tune there, and the Ladies' Aid at the Methodist Church was having one of their weekly meetings, and they said, "Do you think little Doc could come over and play the trumpet for us?" And so my dad wrote out I played the old spinning wheel in the parlor, that tune. And my dad was so convinced that I would need an encore that he sketched out "Good Night, Ladies." And I was a hit immediately.
So you're in high school and you get hired to go on the road with the Ted Fiorito Orchestra.
That was a lot later on.
Yeah. And so what do you remember from those days?
Well, in between, Yeah, when I was in like second or third grade is when I got my trumpet, and uh, I made progress right away, enough so that when the high school band director heard me, Clyde Simpson, he said, "Well, he's going to be my first trumpet player," and so I was, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I was loud anyway.
Mm, that's great. So then, when you did go on the road with the Fiorito Orchestra, what do you remember from those experiences?
Well, in between, I would play dances like at the Grange Hall, or if they had a thing with the Wheat Growers Convention. My dad, if they wanted me to come play, he'd get me one of the cornet solos, and Ida Mae Koonsman, who was the piano player at the Methodist Church, would accompany me, and later on her daughter Barbara. And so I just went along in grade school and got into high school, and I was ready to go to high school. I think I was 14 years old, and Tommy Dorsey's band, it was the beginning of the war, and they called and said, Tommy Dorsey's band is playing at the Paramount Theater in Portland, Oregon, and they need a trumpet player desperately. These guys are all getting drafted. And we told them there's a kid up in Eastern Oregon that plays pretty good. So he said, well, have him come on down. So I went down. I walked into Tommy Dorsey's dressing room. I was 14 years old. I was small for my age. I had a homemade suit on and a cornet case, and he laughed. I imagine it was quite an amusing sight to him. And he says, well, son, what do you got in that case there? I said, well, I got my cornet, Mr. Dorsey. And he says, do you mind if I take a look at it? I said, no. He took it, put it on his lap, undid the latches, pulled out. It was a beautiful old Selmer cornet. By this time, I had graduated too. And he proceeded to play one of Herbert L. Clark's famous cornet solos from the beginning to the end on the cornet, never missed a note. And I was like, oh, what is that? And he said, well, obviously you're too young to go with the band. You need to stay home and finish your school and practice real hard. And maybe someday you will be with my band. And so I then started taking in the summers, I'd go to Portland and play with professional bands and learn quite a bit right away. And that was the start of my career.
So you were drafted into the United States Army?
Yep.
And
I was.
What was your assignment?
Well, I was like everybody else. I just went to basic training. And after I'd been there about for 4 weeks or something like that, I had gone over to the Special Services Club, which is a place where any GI can go in and get a hamburger and a Coke for, 25 cents at that time. And they were having a talent contest. And, just anything to, like if a guy was a guitar player, he'd bring his guitar and play and sing. And so I went over there and I said, I played cornet. And I forgot what I played. I think it was Melancholy Baby. And played it on the cornet with no accompaniment. And there's this guy in a sergeant's uniform. He had hash marks all up and down his sleeve, but not an old guy. And you know who it was? It was Danny Litweiler, who played outfield for the St. Louis Cardinals. He came up to me and he says, "What in the hell are you doing playing that cornet over here?" He said, "There should be a place for you to go and play." And I said, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, I'm in basic training. And he said, "Well, you know, I'm in special services, and we have a band made up of guys that are not in the regular Army band. They just come over and get together. It's like an 8 or 10 piece band, and boy, could they use you." And he told me where it was, and he said, "Come on over." And so I went over, and I helped out right away. There's guys, the war was just ending, and guys were getting sent home, and this is a band of older guys, 35, 40 years old, that were, some of them were professional players and some of them weren't, but they said, "Well, yeah, it was a band called the Top Hatters," and they were good enough. They had all the work on the post. Like, we played the officers' clubs, we played the sergeants' clubs, and they said, "Well, you can come play in our band." They said, but after I played a couple of gigs, I was so worn out from marching all day and firing the rifle and all that, and then I go play till 1 o'clock in the morning, get like 2 hours sleep, and have to fall in again. And I had my cornet there with me, and they made me the company bugler, so I had that to add on to it. And after about 2 weeks, it was beginning to get to me. It was too much for me, and I'm losing weight when I was already kind of skinny anyway. And the guys in the band, who were a bunch of Sergeant Bilko types, real great guys, and mostly very successful businessmen and people that were in, various big companies. And they said, "Doc, we love having you in this band, but my God, you're wasting away. We got to do something to get you out of basic training. You can't do both." And they said, "What does your dad do for a living?" I said, "He's a dentist." And they said, "Well, you know what? We want you to come over to the post finance office and see Major Angus Clist. And we need some guys over there to help with payroll and all of that kind of stuff." And they said, "Get you out of basic training. That's the first thing we got to do. You're going to die." So they said, "You come over there and we'll make an appointment for whenever you can come, and you go in and see Sergeant Tabra there," who was a nasty master sergeant, wasn't a good guy at all. And I got permission to go over there and check in with him, because he put in a requisition for my services, the major did. And so I go over there, and Major Angus Clist says, "Yeah, we could really use you in post finance. We're starting a class for people on how to do payrolls, and we'll requisition you and get you over here." And that's what they did. So then I continued on playing with the Top Hatters and working in the post finance, and that was my career in the Army.
So you get out of the Army, and once again, then you head out of the road, and you're with Charlie Barnett and Tommy Dorsey and Benny Goodman and all those great
Well,
bands.
yeah, I'd had a chance to grow up a little bit musically. And so I went back to Portland, Oregon, and started playing in bands there and did some radio work. And, and they had an orchestra on the radio. And I stayed there for a while, and Charlie Barnett's band came through a place called Jansen's Beach, which is an amusement park with a big ballroom, and all the name bands played there. And so Barnett came through, and he needed a trumpet player. So again, somebody told me about it, and I went over. And Charlie never got over. I was warming up on the Horace Staccato in the dressing room, and he kind of chuckled, and he had me sit in with the band. And he said, "Yeah, you'll do. Can you come down to L.A. and join the band? Because that's where they were headed." I said, "Absolutely." And Clark Terry was in that band, and he had joined the week before. Next thing I know, I'm on the road with Charlie Barnett's band, and I have to say it's one of the best experiences I ever had.
So when you were young, Doc, was there a particular guy that kind of took you under his wing and showed you the ropes, or was it dog eat dog?
It was dog eat dog, all right, but it was clearly defined in in the Barnett band. We played basically Duke Ellington type music, and I could read pretty good and play a section part. And guys like Clark Terry took me under their wing and talked to me a little bit about how I could phrase things better, and I was with that band for a while. We'd get to New York, and I think that band kind of folded up. We had toured all across the United States, mostly through the South, with a mixed race band. And I want to tell you, I had some interesting experiences there as a young white guy in a mixed band. And there wasn't any of them that was any good except the experience of being good friends with Clark Terry and some other guys in Barnett's band. And so when the band broke up, we were through with the tour in New York, and I guess I went back home to Arlington, or not Arlington, but Portland, and played around there for a bit. And then the next band that came through Jansen Beach, they were at I forgot where they were, was Tommy Dorsey. And I joined his band. I know I was in New York with Charlie Barnett's band, and then the band was breaking up, and Tommy Dorsey needed a couple of trumpet players, so he hired me and Ray Wetzel from Barnett's band, and we went down to Houston, Texas, to a brand new hotel that was opening up down there. It was just an unbelievable place, and played with Tommy's band. And of course, Tommy didn't know who in the hell I was, but he figured, well, he's a trumpet player. And so I'm sitting in the band, and Tommy came out after we played a dance set first, and now we're going to do a show. And Tommy comes out, picks up his trombone, no warm up, played the theme song, da da dee dee dee, and I broke down and sobbed to think I had made Tommy Dorsey's band, and I was with Tommy on and off for I don't know, a couple of years, and then I decided to go to New York and settle down. I wanted to see if I could get into studios, and so anyway, I'd rather you ask me questions. I could.
No, this is great. So it's around 1949, and you begin your association with NBC and one of the studio bands, and then
it was 1947, and I hadn't advanced that much yet, but I went to New York, and I think to join Tommy Dorsey's band, and I had been able to practice. And at that time, after a couple of stints on the road with Tommy Dorsey's band, which was incredibly great, then I decided to stay there because I had gotten married and had a little baby daughter, and I knew I just couldn't travel anymore. And I wanted to stay in New York and see if I could get in the studios, but I knew I had to have some training. So I asked people, I said, who's the best person in town to study trumpet with? And without any difference, everybody said, well, you need to go see Benny Baker. And he had been Toscanini's first trumpet player. And he was still doing, playing in the, I don't know, it was like Bell Telephone Hour Symphonic Orchestra. And he took me on as a student, and then I made a lot of progress with him, and I remember going in there the first lesson, and he said, well, what do you got in mind? I said, well, I'm not interested in going to play in a symphony orchestra, so I don't need to mess with all of that stuff. I just need to play better. Although I'd won 3 state contests and a national regional when I was a kid, I could play all the cornet solos and all of that stuff. And he said, oh, okay, well, I think we can do that. And he promptly took me through the Arbon book and about 10 other instruction books, and worked on my transpositions and all of that. And I was playing in the studios. I got on the Kate Smith show, and one thing led to another, and I was just a busy studio guy playing in New York.
And from there, you land a job in the Tonight Show band in 62? You're going to play lead trumpet under Skitch Henderson, and
yeah, I don't know what year it was, but yeah, I was getting to be well known around town, and so the NBC had started doing television shows, and they had a Kate Smith show, and she was on at 4 in the afternoons, and they needed a trumpet player, first trumpet player. And I went out to the guy's house in Long Island and played about 3 notes. And he said, "Oh, you'll do fine." And I was with Kate Smith for like 3 years. And by this time, I continued my studies with Benny Baker, 1 or 2 lessons a week. And when I wasn't going out and working on a television show or a record, I was home practicing out of my books.
So when you started that association with NBC and the Tonight Show, did you ever think you'd spend 30 years of your life there?
I never thought about it. I was just going day to day. By now I had a wife and a couple of little girls, two daughters, and I was actually getting to be one of the busiest trumpet players in New York City. I played everything from symphony music to jazz to small group. I did a lot of record dates, and because there was actually more work than there was trumpet players that could play that stuff, and I could play it, so I was, pretty busy.
So when you're named to lead the Tonight Show band, and all of a sudden now it completely changes the band's image, right? So who came up with the new approach to have, you front the band as a soloist, and who had the idea for those wonderful wardrobes that you're famous for?
Well, that's a multi-pronged question, but I'll take care of it. So I'm doing all the record dates in town, and I was really busy, and things were going well. And NBC put on this Tonight Show. Nobody knew what it was. It really, it was non-existent. And Skitch Henderson had the band, and I had a small, like a 7-piece band or something. And that lasted for a couple of years. And then it went on to something else. And I know, it became the Jack Parr Show. And then one day I get a call from Skitch, and he says, "Hey, NBC is getting rid of this television show they got on at night with Jack Parr. They got this guy, Johnny Carson." And by then I knew who Johnny Carson was. And he said, I'm going to have a big band on there. I want you to come and play first trumpet for me. And I said, well, Skitch, the way it is, I'm so busy, and I'm really doing well at what I came here to do in the first place. And I knew him. I'd played some dates for him, and he called me Carl. He said, "Now, Carl, you come and play first trumpet for me in that band, and you won't be sorry." So I figured, well, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. So I did. And after a few years, I was doing the Tonight Show, and I'd be, a lot of other things. And let's see, how did that work? Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I was a trumpet player in the band, and one day Skitch said on a Friday he's leaving after the show, and he gets to the door out of the studio, and he turns and says, "Oh, Doc," he says, "Hey, I won't be here Monday. You take over the band." And he's out that door, and I said, but I can't. And it was too late. He was gone. So Monday, I'm standing in front of the band, and Johnny Carson liked it, and it worked out. And then, as it turned out, Skitch was headed on to do some other things, and he was interested in conducting symphony orchestras and all of that. And so I was busy too, doing a lot of dates in town, and Johnny needed a band leader, then he got Milton DeLugg, who had done the some show at NBC some years before that. And it didn't work for Johnny or Milton either, I guess. I don't know. And so Johnny, I was doing concerts with Johnny in, like arenas. I'd go and hire a big band in these different towns and go out and play a couple of trumpet solos. And then one of the McGuire sisters, Phyllis McGuire, who was doing a single at the time, was the girl vocalist, and then a couple of people who were a dance team. And then I'd play Johnny's theme with the big band, and he'd come down the stairs. And one day, the guy who was his producer at that time came up to me. Well, I don't know where we were playing. I think it might have been Baltimore. And he said, "I need to talk to you." And I said, "Yeah, what is it?" He said, "Well, I'll tell you the truth. Johnny is not exactly thrilled with the way it's working out as with the band leader he has now. And he wants you to come back and take a shot at leading the band and see if it'll work out." He said, "Will you do it?" I said, "Yes." And so it was just a trial. And I had a friend down in Enid, Oklahoma that I knew very well, quite an old lady who was a psychic, and she was very good. And I called her up. I said, "Ann, am I going to be the band leader of the Tonight Show?" She said, "Yes, you are going to be the band leader of the Tonight Show, and it's going to be very successful for you." I said, "Well, okay, I'll give it a go." And by then, Johnny was used to they would use me as a foil, like the guy to go to get a joke out of or something like that. And I realized, wow, I'm the leader of the band now. I can't just wear my same old blue suit. But I was going by a store from Italy, Bara, and they had all kinds of wild clothes in there. And it was the beginning of the time when it was the revolution on campuses and people were wild, the wild dressing. I got right into that. I mean, and Johnny took one look at that first tie I had on, and he had a joke, bam, like that. And so then I had to get another tie, and then I had to get a whole suit, and it became like a part of the show. And I was there all the way through to the end.
Yeah, and it became a very important part of the show. I have to ask you about Tommy Newsom. And for our listeners, Tommy Newsom obviously played saxophone in the band, and front of the band when you, Doc, would shift over to the number 2 seat that was occupied by Ed McMahon. And Tommy came across totally opposite of you. I mean, he was obviously a great musician. When did his talents get your attention?
Oh, Tommy and I worked together doing club dates around New York. And we were very good friends. And he was in Skitch's band, but he was playing tenor sax. And I knew exactly what I wanted the band to be like. I wanted to have a Duke Ellington type of band. I wanted to get a different sound out of the saxophones. So I told Tommy, I said, "You know what?" His nickname was Moose. I said, "You know what, Moose? I want you to move over and play alto." He said, "Well, no, I play tenor." I said, "Not anymore. I I said, I want you to have a wide open lay on your mouthpiece and a good heavy reed. And I want to get like that Duke Ellington saxophone kind of sound. He said, well, I don't know. I see where you're going, but I'm not too sure. But I said, well, I need you to do this. Do it for me. He said, okay. And then he became my go-to guy when I wanted to go out and do something with the symphony orchestra or something, whatever. And I remember the producer, who shall be nameless, but you wouldn't know who it was. You wouldn't know the name anyway. I said, I have a date on such and such a place to play with a symphony orchestra, and can I take off that one night? And he said, well, yeah, but who's going to lead the band? I said, Tommy. And he said, Tommy Newsom? He says, not on your life. I said, oh, yeah, he's going to lead the band and he'll do a great job. Don't you worry about that. And that was his start as taking over for me when I wasn't there. And we were the best of friends. And when I wanted to get something arranged, whether it was for symphony orchestra or big band or a small group, I would go to Tommy because he was a great arranger. And I said, he could write anything. And he had been in the Air Force band and wrote some stuff for them. And they still play some of those charts today, as a matter of fact. So that was the Tonight Show. And then came the day that the news was already out that the Tonight Show band, or that the Tonight Show was going to move to the West Coast, because we'd been going out there doing, we'd stay for a week or whatever. And I had a band that I'd put together out there, and I didn't really want to go out because I was a New Yorker through and through. And but I decided, well, I guess I have to do it, so I did, and was there till the final day.
Final day. So, Doc, when your name comes up in conversation, and people are talking about you and your great playing and the Tonight Show, and it always comes around to this conversation that you had with Johnny about Thanksgiving dinner, and that's on YouTube. And it's gotten over 1.4 million views on YouTube, and you must have so many special memories.
Getting paid for that.
Pardon?
I wish I were getting paid for that.
Oh yeah, I do too. But it's one of the funniest moments ever on television, and I'm sure you got so many special memories. But the one thing that I was always aware of is that no matter what else was happening in the world, when you guys were on TV, it was showtime. And so, Doc, how does one get themselves in a place where that every time they're on camera, on stage, whatever that they're doing, that it's showtime, that you put your best foot forward? How do you get to that point in life?
Well, probably by not putting your best foot forward at one point and getting fired, or somebody saying, you're capable of doing this job, but you got to shape up and do this or that. But I think it goes with playing a band instrument, whether it's a big band or a symphony or what. If you are good enough to make a living at it, you have to keep practicing every day and every spare moment to stay as good as you can get to be, or even better. And if you don't, there is a list this long of guys waiting to take your place. So you practice and you practice and you practice some more.
Yeah, I asked that question, Doc, because a lot of teachers are listening to this podcast. And in teachers, I think they're performers too. And I think they've got a responsibility to show up every day and give their students their very, very best effort. And even when things aren't going as you hoped, you got any advice for those teachers?
Well, I did clinics with high school bands, and then I'd have to work with the kids in the grade school and doing clinics, and I had a chance to observe what these guys are doing. And I want to tell you, it was just one great experience after another, because the bands were very, they were a little raw sometimes, but in the end, the material was there and you could work with it and get things played the way you wanted to have it played. And I very quickly learned to appreciate those high school band directors, I'll tell you that, because when I'd go out and I had hard music, really classical things and big band things. And so I had to depend on the high school band director to get it done. And I was always pleasantly surprised. And I came to the conclusion that the best teachers in every high school, almost without fail that I worked at, the best teachers in the school were the school music teachers, the high school band directors. They had to be pretty darn good players themselves. They had to know all different kinds of music, like the kind of stuff they would play with the concert band. And then along came the jazz bands, and they had to know that. And I've often said, if all the teachers working in high schools were as good as the high school band directors, we'd be a lot better off.
The musicians you hired to play in your bands, and they were the best musicians in the world. Outside of being great players, were there other characteristics or qualities that you looked for in them as people?
Well, I never looked for it because I just assumed that it was going to be there or else. And they knew what or else meant. But I had Tommy Newsom and Eddie Shaughnessy, our drummer. And if they were with me, when I'd hire guys to play in a band and I'd get to a town, and if I had strange players, Eddie Shaughnessy and Tommy, but mostly Eddie, they were my police brigade. I'd seen them take this kid that was dressed like a bum, had no manners, slumped over in his chair, but could play a little bit. And we needed him. And they take that guy off over in the corner of the stage on the first break. And Eddie's right under his nose telling me, here's what you do. And Tommy, the same thing. And so they were able to take kids that were not mature in other ways besides music or musically either, and give them an education and a lot of information in very short notice. Like, you do this or you won't be here for the show tonight.
That's great. So when you were leading the band at the Tonight Show band, and then later on when that ended and you were on the road, what was your daily practice regimen?
Well, it all goes back to Benny Baker. And when I told him I don't necessarily want to be a classical guy playing in a symphony orchestra, but I want to be able to play that kind of stuff good enough to where I can make a living working in the studios. And he said, oh, okay, we'll do that. And he took me through every book written about trumpet instruction, taught me how to transpose parts if I were in a symphony. And there was no give or take. It was either you do it or someone else will have your practice time, your lesson time.
Well, you certainly lived that model, because I remember being a student at the University of Missouri around 1974, and you were given the homecoming concert on campus. But before that, you were going to play with the University of Missouri Marching Mizzou Band, and I was assigned to get you from the press box to the football field for halftime. And during the first half, I watched you during a rainstorm that was going on outside the press box. You played the Clark Technical Studies the entire first half while you watched the football game. And I was just like knocked on my butt as a college student when I heard this. I mean, it was fantastic.
Well, Benny Baker, I started with the Arbin book and then St. Jacomb's, and then mixed in with it was the Clark Technical Studies. And he said, you have to be able to play this stuff, period. If you want to make a living as a trumpet player, and I think you do, and I think you can, but boy, this is what you have to do. So I did it. And now in the meantime, I've got a wife and a couple of kids back in New York are waiting for me to bring the checks home. And then 3 kids. And so I wasn't just playing the trumpet for the heck of it. I was trying to earn a living to raise my family. And the gigs were there, but boy, there was always 2 or 3 guys waiting for you to screw up. And if you did, they were right in take over your job. And that was the end of that.
So did you ever have one of those concerts when it was over? You said, damn, I got to go right straight to the practice room.
Yeah. I have, and I've done it. And people were amazed. And I said, well, this is what I do for a living. Don't you understand that? If I don't practice and keep it up, I won't have a job. And, there's this to it too. The trumpet is a jealous mistress. If you don't practice and take care of that horn and do good, that trumpet will eat you up. And you will be severely embarrassed and out of work.
You spent Go ahead.
There's no substitute for practice. Yeah. You can't just wish you could do it. And I was talking with Kathy this morning a little bit we're talking about, working with school bands and what did you tell them and all. And she wanted to know about what happened when you're trying to get them to play big band music. And I explained the difference between the language of playing in a big band or a jazz band and the language of the classical language of playing in a symphony orchestra or a movie studio. And it's very demanding. That's all there is to it. And if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it.
You spent many years, Doc, serving as a pops conductor with orchestras around the world, and you were in residency with Phoenix and Minneapolis and Milwaukee, where I had an opportunity to see you on a couple occasions and probably some others. So when you stepped on the podium with those orchestras, did you have any concerns or worries?
Yeah. about 99 of them all sitting right out in front of me. People who knew what the hell they were doing, and I'm conducting a classical piece for the very first time. You know what I did? Well, I'd say, take a break, guys. And I would ask the string players mostly, because I knew how to conduct so that it could be understood by the brass players and the woodwinds and all of that. But if I'm doing a classical piece, I already had an understanding of the language of a violin player, because Benny Baker, just like my father, I never had one single trumpet lesson with Benny. They were all violin lessons, strangely enough. And I remember one time my dad, when I was first starting out, I'm playing along, he said, play this. And I picked up the horn, and the first note I hit, he said, stop. He said, can't you hear that? I said, what? He said, you just dropped the bow on the strings. He says, when you're playing a classical piece, now you have to have that bow moving when it gets on the string, and it's a smooth musical sound. And so right then and there, between him and Benny Baker, I never had a trumpet lesson. I had all violin lessons during my whole growing up period. And so when I started working with symphony orchestras, I knew I had to talk in their language. It would, because you have a lot of time to rehearse these things. And I remember one time playing with the Minneapolis Orchestra, or the Minnesota Orchestra. We were running out of rehearsal time, and I said, well, let's turn over such and such a piece, which is a classical piece. I said, we've done this one together before, so we'll just do it like we did. And one of the viola players looked up and said, no, we'll practice it right now. Whether you've done it before or not, we don't play anything on the stage that we don't rehearse in the rehearsal. And I thought, wow, that's nice. And I thanked him. And, because I was never thought of as really a conductor of in those situations. And they were trying to help me out, and I appreciated it. So I would go to string players, especially, and if we were playing a very difficult classical thing, I would say, how do you want me to conduct this? And they said, oh, okay. Well, what you do, and they'd explain it, and it saved me a lot of time, and I made good friends that way, and I learned a hell of a lot.
I remember one summer you were playing with the Grant Park Symphony Orchestra in Chicago, and sitting ahead of me in the audience was Chicago's principal trumpet player in the symphony, Bud Herseth, and his wife, Avis. And he had a big smile, and he was just such a big fan. What do you remember your association with Mr. Herseth? And did you ever have the chance to play with him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of times. And I conducted lucky enough to conduct the Chicago Symphony in their summer programs, and sometimes in the winter, pop shows. But I got good advice from some symphony conductors that knew I was doing the pops programs. They said, do yourself and the audience and the orchestra a favor. Make sure you have a good representation of classical music, because it's like an advertisement. You're going to have people in that audience who have never been to a symphony orchestra before. And if they hear you doing a good rendition of some classical music, they might take an interest in coming. And it worked out that way. So I always, if I had any questions, I would go to people in the orchestra, like it was the French horn part that I wanted to know more about. I'd ask them, say, how do you want me to show this? What do you want to see? And they'd say, well, thanks for asking. And they would show me. And boy, it came in handy, I'll tell you that.
Doc, you're the Babe Ruth of trumpet players in my book. And if they ever want to build a Mount Rushmore of trumpet players, you're going to be the first face on that statue. I know that. And anybody else you want to see up there with you?
Yeah, Bud Urseth. He'll already be there. Trust me. If he isn't, he should be.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, today you play a Shires trumpet, and I want to give a shout out to my friends at Shires and to the people at Eastman Musical Instruments who are the parent company of Shires. They're great people, and they produce great instruments. But I want to know about the Doc Destino model trumpet and how you got the name Destino and how you came up with it.
Well, the Destino, the opera Il Destino, and I had a great fondness for that, and I wanted to have an Italian name that would be meaningful to have printed on the bell of a horn, and I took that as my word, Il Destino. And I've had incredible success with the Shires Company. And after all these years, I've been making trumpets now for like 30 years or more. I stopped counting. And I've learned a lot along the way. And I'm working on a new, I guess the word is iteration of the Destino trumpet with one of the guys at the factory that is, heading up the trumpet parts. And I've been with him a long time, and so I know all the guys in the factory, and we put our heads together because I wanted to make a trumpet a little bit different. And so I just let it be a natural growth. And it really started with, I was playing in Phoenix, and I went to practice at the concert hall, and one of the guys from the Shires Company was with me, and the guy that was in charge of the trumpet division, and I'm over there practicing, and all of a sudden I said, "Hey, have you got any of your student horns over at the music store?" And he said, "Well, yes, absolutely." And I said, "I'd like to play it." He said, "I'll be right back." It took him 10 minutes, 5 minutes. He's back with that horn. I took it out, put the mouthpiece in, played a few notes. And I said, "What bore is this student horn?" And I think he said 467. I said, 467. I've been playing trumpet a long time, and I'm a pretty strong guy, and I cannot play a 467 trumpet. How in the hell do you expect to get a kid who's just picking up a horn for the first time, and it's a 467? I can't manage it. How's he going to do it? He says, "Well, what should the bore be?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you exactly. It should be 459. and that was the end of that. A few weeks later, I was at the factory, and they said, "Hey, you got a package here from the Shires people," and it was a trumpet. It was a student horn, and it was a 459. And I passed it around to the guys in the factory. Most everybody there plays trumpet. And there wasn't several of them said, if I had a gig to play tonight, I could take this horn and play that gig on this horn. And that's been my relationship with not only Shires, but Eastman, is that if I have an idea of something I want to do, I ask their permission, and they always say, be our guest, do what you want. So I'm like a kid in a candy store, I'm able to experiment with horns, and I'm working on a new version of my trumpet now. I found some things that I had a little question about. So I went deeper into it. I was up in Vermont with Kathy, and we were up there visiting her mom, and I had a great place to practice the horn. I had a chance to do some observations. I wasn't just practicing to get better on a piece of music. I was trying to find out more that I wanted to know about the trumpet. And when I found out what it was, I called up the people at Eastman. I said, I want to do this, 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 and this. And they said, well, go ahead. You're the one that's going to play the trumpet. And I thought, wow, how many companies I was with, they would say, oh, you can't do that. No, you can go out and do clinics and we love it. You're playing a horn, but no, you don't make trumpets. What do you know about making a trumpet? And when I got with Eastman, they said, anything you want to do as an experiment, you just tell us what it is and we'll fix you up with whatever you need.
Yeah, they're great people.
Yeah, they are. And I'm working on this new trumpet, and it's not something that happens in 5 minutes, It's sending horns back and forth and trying it, and then talking to the guy that's actually helping me at the factory, who is a trumpet player of many, many years. And so it's, I tell you, it's a wonderful experience. And I can't tell you how many guys say, what do you know about making a trumpet? You could play it, but you know anything about making a trumpet? I said, really?
That's great. So, Doc,
when I got with them, they said, you tell us what you want to do, and we'll fix it so you can do it.
And they're great horns. They are just terrific horns.
Yes, they are.
In fact, when I get done with the podcast, I'm calling my buddy Saul Friedgood, the president at Eastman, and I'm going to say, hey, I got to get me one of Doc's new horns.
Yeah. Well, I got downstairs right now. I'm working on it, and I'm coming through very, very quickly. It's all shaping up. I can't say what it is I'm doing because, well, if I do that, then we won't be the only ones doing it.
That's right. And you'd probably have to kill me or something like that, right, Doc?
That's right.
Hey, Doc, do you still listen to music? You got any favorite styles or performers that you like to listen to, or is it across the board?
Oh, yeah. It's kind of hard right now with this pandemic, I imagine. Kathy since I'm 93 years old, she won't let me out of the house. I'm not allowed out. And I haven't been out of this house since the whole pandemic thing got going. And because if I get hit with it, it's curtains,
Yeah, you can't allow that. So when this pandemic finally goes, you going back out on the road and going to play some more?
Oh, sure. Yeah. In the meantime, I'm looking at Kathy and I are writing a combination trumpet instruction book, and she was the trumpet teacher at University of Tennessee for 37 years. And she knows that game backwards and forwards. And I've always been interested. So we're writing an instruction book, or a book for a young trumpet player to have, and with written advice on here's how you do this particular little thing I'm asking you to do here, and not just the notes, but a little advice on how to do it. And I like to cook. And so when I got with Kathy years ago, she was teaching all day long, had to come home, and I thought it's not fair for her to have to cook. So I put my cooking skills to work, and we're including in the book advice on how to eat properly and how to cook what you want to eat. So it's a cookbook, and there's a lot of philosophy in it about. I like being philosophical about playing a trumpet, and in a third stream kind of way, and sometimes you can't explain trumpet playing just in trumpet language. You have to use something that is not right to the point, but sets it up. And a lot of it. And this happened to me when I was at NBC. I took my lesson every week with Benny Baker, and I was playing in an orchestra with Harry Glantz. And they both told me a week apart, trumpet playing is 90% mental. This is where you play the trumpet up here. And so I've had those kinds of thoughts and philosophies about music in general and trumpets particularly. And I think it's good to include that in our book. The book is going to be different, I'll tell you that. And when I cook, I use colorful language. I know you find that hard to believe, but I would tell Kathy, and so much of this and some 4-letter words, and I said, "Oh, I better not say that." She says, "No, just go ahead and say it." So if that's part of the recipe, I said, "Well, it is." So it's going to be one of the first X-rated books on trumpet playing and cooking.
That's part of being a trumpet player, isn't it? To have those words come out every once in a while.
Oh yeah.
So Doc, what advice would you give a young Doc Severinsen?
Very simple. One word: practice. I remember every time I would talk to Bud Hurst on the phone, he was, "Oh, damn it, no, phone." It's the way he talked. He said, "Well, so long. Listen, I got to get off the phone. I got to go do this or that. And don't forget now, practice, practice, practice." And the phone would be slammed down. So my dad said the same thing. He said, I can show you how to do things. And Benny Baker, the same thing. He said, look, I can tell you exactly what you need to know. But if you don't, I'm setting it there for you, and it's up to you to get it or not. The rest is up to you. And I might add that Benny Baker became whatever it is that goes beyond a father figure. He advised me on life situations, and I had some difficult ones that need to be dealt with. And I remember my dad came to visit with me. He went when I took my lesson with Benny. And when I left after my lesson, my dad shook hands with Benny. He said, well, it was very nice to meet you. He's your boy now. And he turned me over to Benny. And Benny's advice wasn't all about trumpets. It was about the life of being a busy and successful trumpet player in New York. And I'm going to tell you, there's a whole lot more than playing the trumpet involved.
Doc Severinsen, you are amazing. And I got tears running down my face here. Having to spend this time with you is something that I just cannot put into words. It's like music itself. It has to be experienced. And
well, it's my pleasure. And because now what I got to do is go practice.
Me too.
And as Bud Hurst said, practice, practice, practice. And when he retired out of the Chicago Symphony, he would sit in where he had the telephone. He had a little table beside what the phone was on, and he had his mouthpiece there. He was through playing trumpet. He had that mouthpiece there, put it up, a few notes every now and then, till the day he died.
Yep.
And I want to tell you, he was one of those friendships that I look back on it and say, there's no way to describe how valuable his friendship was and his mentorship. I mean, it was, I forgot when I was doing a pop show with the Chicago Symphony. We were doing the first thing I had on the program was the Festive Overture by Shostakovich. And so I look up, and here's Bud with a big smile on his face. I'm ready to give the downbeat, and he's looking at me saying, okay, let's go. And when I wanted to know something about how to conduct a certain piece of music, and I'm going to be playing it with some symphony orchestras, I would call Bud, and I'd say, I have to do this. And I forgot what it was now. It was a Wagner thing. It was a kind of long piece and quite difficult. And I had to do it. I mean, there was no two ways about it. So I got the Chicago recording of it, and I had that thing memorized. I'm going to tell you, it was in here. And I didn't feel like I was conducting wherever the orchestra was. I felt like I had the Chicago Orchestra because that's what I had heard. So I conducted it the way I thought it should be. And when we finished it, it went pretty well. And one of the guys in the string section said, I see you have the Chicago version of this with Butters, didn't you? I said, how could you tell? He says, oh boy, no mistaking that. And I said, well, caught again. And that's a wonderful thing about music is the friendships you make. And I'm still making them.
You will for as long as you can. You made one with me a long time before we met, Doc, and I just can't thank you enough. And please give my best to Kathy and best wishes to you. Good health and many, many more years of great trumpeting, and may God bless you.
Well, thank you. And anytime you ever want to do something like this again, just give me call Kathy, and she'll get me up and get me dressed and ready to go, and I'll come and talk to you.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Doc Severinsen is a national treasure. He's a pro's pro, and he was so gracious with his time and so honest with our conversation. I remember a friend of mine, Steve Horniman, who finished out his band director career at Brebeuf Jesuit Academy. It's in the Indianapolis area. And he told me a story of taking some students to hear a Doc Severinsen concert. And this probably sums it up best. After Doc finished playing, a student turned to him and said, "Mr. Horniman, I'd give my life to play like him." And Steve turned to the student and said, "He did." Doc has dedicated his life to his trumpet and to music, and in doing so has enriched the lives of millions of people through his artistry and his humanity. God bless you, Doc. Now it's time for all of us to go practice. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll be back next week with more conversations. Until then, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.